recognise this organisational chart, then you are most probably working in a centralised pyramid hierarchy, because that is what most businesses commonly operate with. But this system is broken. And in this video, I want to share with you the pitfalls of a traditional pyramid hierarchy and what we could choose instead. Hi, I'm Lizzie, and I've spent the past 7 years working with founders and their teams to decentralize their ways of working. Now, I am a huge nerd about new ways of working and always exploring different frameworks and ways that we can decentralize the traditional pyramid hierarchy. So I want to put a caveat at the start of this video that I do have a complete bias when it comes to the hierarchy that we all experience in the workplace. However, what I'm going to share with you today is data-backed. So let's get into it. Now, before I dive into the pitfalls of the traditional pyramid hierarchy, we have to understand the history and context within which it was invented. So the organisational chart, as we know it today, was actually invented in 1854. Yes, that operating system that so many businesses keep defaulting to is more than 100 years old. So it's quite strange, even when we think about that something as old as that hasn't been reinvented. The underlying truth is this system was invented in the Industrial Revolution, a time where we wanted simple processes in order to improve manufacturing. It was a way to divide labour and keep consistency in what was being created. A simple structure for a simpler time. When we look at hierarchy in and of itself, what we're saying is these people have more power and authority over these other people. So we're essentially telling people what to do. It's a very authoritarian way of operating. If you want to dive a little bit deeper into the history of hierarchy, then I would highly recommend the YouTube channel What is Politics? And I will link it in the description below, because there's a specific episode where they talk just about this, how an interaction with native Indians really made the Brits question, why are you living in this prison of hierarchy? Because especially in the UK, we have a class system, which is essentially a hierarchy. It is saying that there are certain people who are more important, who have more resources, authority and power than others. And that's essentially what a hierarchy is. It's denoting where the power sits within a system, within an organisation. Something that's worth being aware of is that the traditional organisational chart was invented in a time where there were huge differences in resources, in power, which meant the bosses or the managers were usually aristocrats or middle-class people. And the other end of the spectrum, the workers, were usually lower class, poor people. So there was a huge differential in their educational prospects, in their economic prospects, which meant that these aristocrats were telling these workers what to do. So the class divide was significantly substantial, and sometimes that still plays out now. But what to be aware of is that the education in particular, it was kind of thought that in a very Victorian mindset, that because these aristocrats and middle class were more educated, they could tell these kind of poor workers what to do because they had more knowledge, more ideas, knew how things worked, and they were just meant to be the doers. Obviously, in most organisations, this has now changed because we have much more equality in our education and our resources. Of course, it's not to the point where we would love it to be, but there is still much improvement since the Victorian times, where we all generally have a high standard of education. Now that you know that this traditional organisational pyramid, this system that most businesses work in, is actually hundreds of years old, built in a time where we needed things to be simple and predictable, it means that now this system is not really fit for purpose in the very volatile and agile world that we live in. As author Erik Korsavig Ostergaard from Teal Dots in an Orange World says, hierarchy is great for predictability, but not for adaptability. And a lot of businesses now need to be able to adapt and be agile to the volatile world that we live in. Just take COVID-19 as an example. We saw huge shifts in our workplace landscape, and many businesses just simply couldn't adapt. So the first pitfall of this outdated system is that it is just not built for the complexity of the world we live in today. Next, I want to talk about slow and poor decision making. What traditionally happens in a pyramid hierarchy is that decisions get made at the top of the pyramid. That is where the power is. That is where the decision-making power lays. And all of the required decisions get funneled up the top, and they get stuck there because the founder or the business owner is totally overwhelmed, and then it's a really delayed descent of those decisions back down the organisational chart. Sometimes you might then add managers into that, and they create another kind of bottleneck and another filter for decisions. And ultimately we start to distribute some decision-making power, but we haven't distributed it enough. They're still kind of like seen as gatekeepers. But the problem with this is that it's really slow decision-making. We're not making decisions quick enough when we need to. And it's very authoritarian. We're still telling people what to do and not encouraging them to make decisions for themselves and actually give them authority to get things done. You have probably seen this not only in your own company, but also experiencing this as a customer with other companies. I will give you an example. A customer calls for a refund on a service or a product, and that person has to get it signed off by a manager. Sometimes that manager might then have to get it signed off by another boss, and so the decision making slows down. Ultimately, what we want to do is make sure that customer service representative has the decision-making power and the authority to make those decisions and give that refund. Not only because as a customer, you're getting frustrated that it's taking so long for them to get back to you, but the energy that gets wasted in that whole communication flow is totally inefficient. The other part of this poor decision-making system is also that it's non-participative. We don't include other people. We're not distributing any power or decision-making. We're just keeping it all completely centralized at the top. And it's down to this one person, or it might even be a few individuals, to make the best decision. We're not gathering the collective knowledge and the collective wisdom of the people who are at the front of those decisions. Because if we take it back to that example of the customer service rep giving a refund, now she's maybe had interactions with that customer and will know why she needs a refund. Why are we then funneling that decision all the way up the top when it's a really small decision that maybe the boss doesn't really want to deal with, and then having to feed it back down? Not getting other people's input on decision making or even giving them decision making means that we're missing out on so much information that could be really useful to us as a business and move us forward more quickly. Competition over collaboration is our next pitfall. And this is because we only have so many spaces on this org chart. As you can see, there are plenty of spaces at the bottom, only one space at the top. And in order for you to get a promotion or to get some bonus or increase your performance, you have to go up this pyramid. And there are only so many spaces, which means you are in competition not only with your colleagues horizontally, but also vertically. You're also in competition with your manager because eventually you want that spot. So people are so busy trying to play this game of the pyramid structure that we're not actually thinking about working well with each other. We're kind of in that one-upmanship mentality. And that means we're not going to collaborate very well if we see each other as competition. From a business perspective, this is so inefficient because serving your client or your customers and achieving the mission all comes last, because all people are interested in is self-interest, not in the collective. There's no collective existing within your organization. It is all about individual competition. The next pitfall is a lack of creativity and innovation. There are so many businesses out there who are desperate to be more innovative and to think differently, to broaden their approaches, their services, their product offering, and they're hiring these innovation gurus, whatever that means. But the reality is, some of the best ideas will come from the people who are working with the product or the customers every single day, yet they are not in the space or the position to give ideas. The challenge we have when it comes to creativity and the hierarchy is that we tend to favour and think more highly of ideas that have come from the top of the hierarchy, and we don't tend to take them seriously at the bottom of the hierarchy. And this is called authority bias. Timothy Clerk wrote about this in the Harvard Business Review in 2022. And he says, authority bias is the tendency to overvalue opinions from the top of the hierarchy and undervalue opinions from the bottom. And it eventually turns into exaggerated deference to the chain of command. Organisations tend to give the most credibility to ideas, suggestions, or points of view based on source rather than substance. So essentially, if you're in a position of power, people will take your ideas more seriously rather than if you're at the bottom of the hierarchy, which is absolutely not what we want. Because in a time where we do need to be adaptable and agile and innovative, we need to be sourcing ideas from all over the organisation, not from just one holy grail. Bureaucracy is the next pitfall, and I'm sure many of us have experienced the frustrating red tape when we have been working in organisations and we're not allowed to do something because this policy says this, and it just feels like it's actually trapping you and restricting you in how you work rather than actually giving you the freedom and autonomy to get work done. And this is where we have loads of rules, policies and procedures that have to be really adhered to. And rather than supporting us in getting the work done, it actually constrains us. Now, bureaucracy in a hierarchy can get absolutely ridiculous to the point where you have to sign a Bic pen out of the stationery cupboard and have it unlocked. All of these kind of unnecessary policies and procedures that aren't actually helpful. Author of Brave New Work and founder of The Ready, Aaron Dignan calls this organisational debt. And this is where there is a true cost to the bureaucratic policies and procedures that you're putting in place. It might not be an obvious financial cost, but it's either costing you in time, in energy, or in reduced productivity. A fantastic example of this was illustrated in the book Reinventing Organisations by Frederic Laloux, where at a company called Favi in France, an engineer would have to sign out a new pair of gloves. Now, this whole procedure would take him 10 minutes. So if his gloves broke, he would need to go to the stock room, someone would need to unlock it, he would have to sign out the new gloves, and then he could go back to his machine to get working. So this whole process, this whole procedure cost 10 minutes. The machine that this man operated cost 5,000 euros every 10 minutes that he was away from his machine. So that is just a very financial example of how this policy or procedure that was put in place to stop people from stealing from the stockroom is actually creating a much bigger cost for the company. Poor communication is another pitfall of the hierarchy, because as we're trying to move information up and down the pyramid, it's distorted. Some bits of information are lost, and we don't always get the context that we need. So many organisations talk about empowering people. We want to empower people, but the reality is they don't give them the full information, because information is also knowledge and power and enables us to make better decisions and think about things. So that means that when we're in this state of a hierarchy where information is distorted, we're not actually getting the full clarity we need in order to get the work done. The final pitfall I want to cover is that we are leaving skills and talent on the table. We are so fixed on putting people in a box and giving them a job title that they feel very restricted and boxed in. And we're not allowed to dabble in other areas of the business and use our skills and talents in different ways. We just have one thing to do, and that's the only thing we're allowed to do. It goes back to that outdated industrial revolution mindset where we just got the worker to do the same thing over and over again. Don't think, don't be creative, don't come up with ideas, just do that thing over and over again. It's a very mechanical mindset that we still have when it comes to how we bring everyone's skills and talents to life as a whole being. So imagine all of the things that you're missing out on if you just give people one job title, one thing to do. There is so much more to individuals. We are multifaceted, multi-creative, multi-skilled people that can contribute in so many different ways. And we're just leaving that all on the table. If you're stuck in a rigid, hierarchical structure, many of these problems will begin to manifest. And even though you will try to mitigate these problems, they will still persist because they are a natural byproduct of this system. So, what's the alternative, you ask me? The absence of hierarchy does not mean the absence of structure. Instead, we can look at more dynamic governance systems that help us to restructure and build something that is unique to our business and our team's needs. Just like these nested organisational structures. Some frameworks already exist to help you get started. These include Holacracy, Sociocracy, Semco Style, Teal, NER, just to name a few. And what these systems help you to do, first of all, is decentralize. We want to stop putting all of that decision-making authority and power at the top. We want to enable people and teams to be able to make decisions. This includes decision-making frameworks and methodologies. Like I say, this alternative approach isn't completely structureless, it's just we're building it for purpose, not just because that's the way things should be. When it comes to decentralization and creating more dynamic organizational structures and systems, much of it is just common sense. It's just we've got so used to this outdated way of working, it's become our immediate default. Now, if you're really curious about what this means, I will create another video around dynamic organizational models. But what I would encourage you to do is to really go off and explore. Read books like Reinventing Organizations, Maverick by Ricardo Semler, Brave New Work by Aaron Dignan. Also, I would highly recommend you listen to the podcast Leadermorphosis by Lisa Gill, who is a thought leader in this space. And I've also interviewed some founders who have chosen this way of working on my podcast, Make It Thrive, which I will make sure to link below. But essentially, what it's about is about liberating ourselves from these constraints of a very Victorian model that no longer is fit for purpose, fit for our individual needs or the collective mission of the company or the organization. So what I want you to do is go away and do some research for yourself and let me know in the comments below what you have discovered. And if you want to talk more about this, I'm happy to drop my Power Hour link below and you can ask me lots of questions. But thank you so much for watching and I'll see you next week.